This
Afternoon, we'll probably
conference
have a
will
couple.
now be recorded.
There it is. Wait for it. Uh, we will probably have some other people popping in as they get their lunches. But I am Amanda Bright. I am faculty at the University of Georgia. I kind of specialize in community news and digital. And I have been working with the GAB for about 2 or 3 years now in order to really dive in and help stations think about digital strategy. I know it is incredibly challenging given the resources to not only do what you already do, but also do some other things now too. So my goal today is to try to throw a lot of like strategic spaghetti at the wall and then just see what hits. I would love to, about halfway through, take comments and questions. I've kind of divided this into two sections, talking about brand building and then talking about revenue. And I would love to hear what you all do that's working, what questions that you have. But my goal today is to take actually a document that I constructed that you all can get by contacting the GAB called the Digital Strategy Guide for Broadcasters, and kind of break it down into some practical steps and tips so that you can do more with your brand. Just for by way of background, I run two news organizations here at the University of Georgia. I am the managing editor of our 9 digital products for Grady News Source, which a lot of you are familiar with because it's our Live at 5 broadcast. But we also have now a portfolio of digital products. And I also am the assistant editor of the Oglethorpe Echo, the weekly newspaper that we took over one county over, and it has 7 digital products now. So a lot of the things that I'm talking to you about are things that either we have tried in our newsrooms and have worked, or we have used our digital natives and innovation fellows to programs we have here out of the innovation lab to give it a shot in stations as well. So hopefully a few things here will pop up as useful for you on your radar. So that's the idea. I did want to mention just really quickly that this is the first in a series of 4. Mackenzie and Garrett are helping me out with this, that we're going to talk about several different things that we think are useful to you all. And so just highly encourage you to check in with us on the other sessions too, for whatever is useful for you. We're going to be talking about social media and vertical video in May. SEO and analytics and data on August. That seems like a good summer topic. And then in October, we're going to kind of pivot to like what's next, industry trends. I've got a lot of colleagues up on the 5th floor of the Grady College working with, oh, I forgot about those cute little emoji things. That's fun. Working with Apple Vision Pro and doing some VR and AR experimentation. Obviously, AI and other chatbot types of things. But what's pretty cool about emerging trends is they're way more accessible than they used to be. So we'll dive into that in the fall. So I just want to jump in and talk about the big elephant in the room, which is when we talk about digital and we talk about broadcasting or stations, we know that staffs are spread thin. We know that you don't have necessarily all the resources that you want. And we also know that we have a growing problem with news deserts. What I want to try to give to you today are very specific and practical strategies to build your brand and to think of other ways to get revenue on digital for your stations. Please hear me that like I don't want to present anything that is going to be like there's no way unless I have a staff of 55. And so hopefully some of these things will hit because of that focus. I also just want you to share your ideas and ask lots of questions. So I'm going to break a couple times for that. Please feel free to do it. When it comes to brand building, I use this acronym with all of my stations, and I do print as well and digital, as well as my students, called PAM. The idea is purpose, audience, and message. And I feel like this is probably the most foundational piece of, am I gonna be able to make more money on digital and have opportunities for doing that? And can I build my brand and reach new audiences on digital for my station? It all comes down to that purpose, audience, and message piece. I've found some stations think about this all the time, and they're like, okay, here's who we are, here's who we're trying to reach, and here's what we're trying to reach them with. Some stations thought about it a long time ago, but haven't revisited it recently. And I would say it's probably a conversation y'all need to have maybe once a year, right? Like, go out, get a couple drinks to a restaurant or something, and who are we? What are we doing? And what are we trying to do next? That kind of vision casting specifically for digital strategy is really vital, because I think one reason why stations feel overwhelmed, what I've heard from a lot of stations, is that they feel like they have to do it all. Like they have to be on every product and platform. They have to have a newsletter, an app, on every social media, right? Quick, make a TikTok. Like, actually, no. I would highly suggest that you be much more measured and intentional. Do not do every product and platform. For instance, X or Twitter or whatever we're calling it right now, it's kind of a weird place. It may be a place you don't want to be unless you're really interested in sports or very specific things that are still active there. However, you may feel like, I want to take the time I was using there and I want to put it on Instagram because I want to try to reach some younger audience members. I would be as strategic as possible, and when possible, cut back. Like, do a few things well versus trying to throw it on all the digital things. And we have found stations have a lot more success and honestly just have a lot less stress when they think about doing a couple products well versus all the products, and then they're just trying to do it as fast as they can. So just one quick thought for this, for news oriented stations, because I know we have a mix of news and entertainment oriented ones. um, I would just think about your PAM as the value proposition of what you do that's local. um, One of the things that I still feel like we struggle with in local news, and this is across all products, or I mean, all types of local news, is we're still trying to pull in those national stories. We're still trying to cover things that are beyond our scope. What really does well is when we give people things that cable or satellite radio can't do. Local government accountability, localizing trends, increased transparency, letting people see what happens in their neighborhood. And so if you think about the content that you put on digital platforms, often it's really attractive to like grab onto a big news story, right? Because you can build traffic that way. But often it's very shallow traffic that never comes back. It's not recursive. And so thinking about how you can maybe take that trend and localize it, or have local people talk about it, or is going to actually create more loyalty for your digital brand over time, even though it's a little bit tougher. For entertainment stations, what we have found, and this is both research based and anecdotal, is that it's really about what we call community connectedness, being able to be the source of where the events are, what's happening, where to go eat, um, in your community. And we know that because local newspapers specifically are atrophying at an incredible rate, which is tragic, broadcasters can step into that space, and allow people to get that community calendar piece, and find out what's going on, so that they know what to do this weekend. And so that's really where a lot of that PAM sits. Now, that all being said, let's just talk about how you develop a brand. A lot of it has to do with visuals and design, but it's funny because we used to not be as picky about whether or not all your logos matched, and that everything kind of felt the same across all the places that you are. But audiences are very picky now, and I think it's honestly because like dish detergents got really good at brand, right? So I mean, like everything has gotten better at using the same colors, the same fonts, the same styles, the same tone across. And so people want that from their news organizations too. And so really what it is about consistency. A lot of times I'll send students into stations and you'll have kind of like a different logo on all your digital products. And it's a little bit different than the one you've got in your broadcast package or the one that you've got on the front of your station. Just creating some consistency can be an amazingly easy brand building tool to make sure that people can recognize you like the McDonald's arches from 7 miles away. I know who that is because I know that color, I know that style, I know that font. And if they can spot you from far away and you really plug away at that brand consistency, that really helps build loyalty, which then can tie into revenue. So a couple kind of quick thoughts. Again, I'm just going to throw some strategies at you and see what you think. Number one, we are at a cultural time, particularly for those kind of 50 to 45 and below, that we don't trust institutions and organizations as much as we trust individuals. So that's just that's research based. My colleagues are doing a lot of that interesting research here at Grady College. Um, so part of that is not just having a brand that is faceless and nameless, but really leaning into your personalities, your on-air talent, the people who are connected to the community, but even putting your producers sometimes in front of the camera, putting your, the people in the back up in the front to say, I live here, I know this place, I've been here for 30 years, I'm excited, I'm out here at the T-ball games. Um, there's a sense in which we trust other people more than we trust slick brands. So as much as I said, be consistent and slick, now I'm also saying pair that with real personalities. I know a lot of people don't always want to be in the camera who aren't in front of the camera all the time. And I will tell you, we're training our students all to be in front of the camera, so hopefully they'll be good for you. But it's really important to share those personal stories, to have real people connect. And that makes a huge difference on digital platforms specifically. All of the best content on digital is people turning the camera on themselves or showing something, which leads to point number two is behind the scenes content. Um, like digital products, whether it's Facebook or an app or an email newsletter or Instagram, they cannot get enough of behind the scenes content. People adore it. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that there are fewer of us in the industry now than there used to be. And so legitimately people don't know what happens in that, in the room where we record. Of course, green screens are always fun for people. They just don't know what it looks like in your studio. And I think giving them that connection, which again is personal, can really build your brand. Having people as they're on the air for the radio just really quick turn and be like, hey, this is what we're talking about. This is who's here. This is what I plan on playing next. Um, can build such an important connection. So, we tell our students when we think about strategy, like one piece of behind the scenes content per week, right? Can you come up with some way to show what's happening, how your reporters are fact checking, or how people are out at an event and representing your station? It builds such a good continuity. I know some of you are already doing these things, but I'm just trying to again, throw the spaghetti at the wall. Another thing that we see a lot of that I would love to encourage you all to do is just super amounts of consistency. So a lot of what we see, because some stations don't have the personnel to do digital, right? Like to have like a digital person necessarily, or a dedicated person. We will see everything go up in fits and starts. So there'll be like 5 Facebook posts and then a couple days where there's nothing, right? There's something in the algorithm of every social media platform and most digital platforms in general that responds well to subtle consistency. We don't need high volume. I will say there are some stations out of Atlanta, some of the bigger ones that will put 25, 30 posts up a day. And most audiences say it's too much. Like it floods their feed. And they're just like, I don't know. I mean, all these things aren't important to me. A couple posts a week on any given platform can be plenty as long as they're good quality. And sometimes making our audiences thirsty for more can be a really good strategy. But it needs to be consistent if at all possible. So there's lots of like tools or just like a Google spreadsheet, a Google Doc, whatever, like some kind of big thing on the wall of your office where you say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to make sure to be consistent. And it's funny because people will build routines and expectations around your content on digital platforms, whether it's an email newsletter, whatever it is. Um, they will look for it, and it provides a sense of kind of connectedness and almost intimacy with your audience when they're like, oh, but they always share this fun thing on Monday where they like look back 50 years or whatever it is, and they feel that connection with you in a more personal way. So that brand consistency is important. I will say it depends on the digital product. So you can send out Twitter posts really often, right? Like I can live tweet a high school basketball game, and that's not going to be a problem to flood the feed. But on Instagram, if you put out too many posts, people get angry. Like they just get like, it's just too much. And so I think there's a feel for it that you will get based on the tool. I will say sometimes daily email newsletters are great, and sometimes it's just way too much. And you should be like, no, I just move to weekly. That's plenty to do what we need to do. So thinking about timing and consistency can really help build your brand. Couple other quick thoughts. We all know about cross promotion. We do it all the time. Um, but if you're working to build a brand new digital product, say a newsletter or an Instagram account or a new section of your website, one of the best things you can do is cross promote it across all of your other products. Particularly talking about it on air. I will say it's there, that is one of the more preferable versions, and people will like hear you talk about it or see you show it on air and then actually go and download it or find it, which is unusual because typically cross promotion doesn't work that well. But there's something about the on air like announcement or seeing it or hearing someone talk about it or use it that actually will drive traffic to digital products, which I find fascinating. When you think about cross promotion, obviously linking, when people making things as easy as humanly possible for people to get to those other products is important. Um, but a lot of times, with our students, when we're working in our newsrooms, we will put certain content on Facebook that is the same story as we put on, say, Instagram, but we know we're catering to a different audience. So Facebook is going to be older. They're definitely more into still pictures and a little bit more text and context, whereas Instagram tends to really push reels, video, stories, and it's a bit of a younger audience. So, for instance, we just covered a Valentine's Day ball at the Oglethorpe Echo this week. It was at our senior center. Adorable pictures and video of seniors dancing and having a great time to some pretty happening music. We packaged that story differently on Facebook than we did on Instagram, but we told the story in both ways. But we didn't use the same footage, the same photos, the same content. And that kind of cross promote. It's like, hey, if you want to see the full video, go to Instagram, right? And we can pull people across in that way, and that can be useful. Um, One of my other biggest tips before we take a break and have any questions or ideas sharing is about engagement. So, a lot of us are still using digital platforms, and I see this even with my students. They try to do this all the time as well, and they just post content and push it out there, just like our traditional terrestrial stations, where we're just like, hey, I'm just going to give you the content. The thing about digital is that it's not a one-way conversation, and it shouldn't be. It should be a dialogue. It should be interactive. So I would rarely just put content on a digital platform. Instead, I would package content on a digital platform and then ask for people to do something with it. I ask for them to share it. I ask for them to respond, to comment, to put it in their Facebook groups, to take a poll, to whatever it is. But I want an intentionality, and that's why I like fewer posts ultimately on any kind of digital. I want it to be something that people can go, I know what I'm supposed to do with this next. I'm supposed to like give it a thumbs up if I feel this way about it, or I'm supposed to share it with a certain group of people, or I'm supposed to share my pictures of the event because I was there too. Digital needs to be circular, conversational, and recursive. So with everything you do, start training your audience to talk back to you in some way, shape, or form. I will tell you, it takes some time. It's not like, you ask them to do something and they'll comply, right? They are human beings. But ultimately, if we start training them that we will talk back to them. So we had a situation where we put up a graphic and asked for story ideas for news source. And we had about 5 comments underneath. And we had our reporters respond to each and every comment. That's a great story idea. You know what? We're going to start talking to the Board of Commissioners and see what we can find out. That kind of recursive kind of dialogue allows them to see the digital's not just us speaking to them, it's them speaking to us. And then we can start having a relationship. It really builds your brand. Um, of course, it takes time. And of course, you have to be careful about commenters that are not as polite as we would hope they would be. So, we know that those things are true. But I would say in local news, more often than not, we tend to get some decent stuff out of it. So that's important. Um, one of the, I'm going to pause here real quick before we move on. Any questions, thoughts, or comments as we're plowing through these ideas?
I had something. I heard you mention Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it these days.
Mm,
I was curious, I guess I know Twitter has been a pretty popular social media platform for a while, and I know a lot of the GAB member stations really used Twitter a lot to promote digital. So I was wondering, I guess, what you have seen, I guess, in those changes lately. I know there's been a bunch of updates with their, policies and their APIs and everything like that. But
right.
Dr. Bright, what have you seen? And then if any of our stations want to chime in and say, how are you guys using Twitter differently, or are you still using it at all? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so from my point of view, one of the only things that's still really engaging and doing well on Twitter is sports, particularly prep sports, but sports in general. I think that audience has not left; they have stayed there. Whereas a lot of the news consumers have gone elsewhere, whether it's to Instagram or possibly Threads or TikTok, when it comes to actually getting information. I think you see pockets of interesting conversations that still happen in subgroups, but if you look at Twitter's time over time usage and the people that are using it, that are even still there, that are actually actively posting or looking, it is just bottomed out. I mean, the audience is about a third of what it used to be. So I do see that in this moment as a time to maybe reallocate the resources that we were using there, unless you feel like you are getting good engagement or you're connecting with a specific audience. That being said, we really only post sports. So like the Oglethorpe Echo, we post our prep sports stuff. We tag the Oglethorpe Athletics and all the individual players because they follow us on Twitter, but we do not put features or news on Twitter because they just sit there and languish.
Yeah.
But great to open it up to stations too, how you're using it or how you're seeing it not or be effective or be effective.
So would that include basically, so if like you're posting on Twitter X, is that a link out to like a website or something like that? Or are you saying like it was just like just content in general, just getting people to engage with it is easier?
Yeah, so I mean both, and I would say referral links on all platforms have plummeted as well. Most people do not want any social media teases. They don't leave the platform to go to your website or to go somewhere else to get more information. Typically, they will see what's in front of them. And if it's enough, great. If it's not enough, they keep scrolling. Now, click-throughs do happen, probably mostly on Facebook. That's the one that actually the click-throughs are more successful than say Twitter or Instagram right now. But I would say that's maybe like 10%, maybe five of people who really go somewhere. It is much better, and this is actually on my next slide, but the idea of using social not to tease but to deliver content, and then build your brand by saying we have information that you want, now here are other places you can go to get even more information, rather than clicking through to an actual story. We really are thinking about social much more as a delivery platform rather than a teasing platform. Very good questions. Okay, I'll just do pop in if anyone else has anything else. So, a couple other quick thoughts about brand before we go to revenue. One is this idea of social listening. Not sure if you've heard the term before, but the idea is that you are consistently going to places on social media, or you have someone maybe once a week who has built kind of a dashboard almost where they have followed all these accounts, and they can really think about and look for what's happening in the community and what the conversations are. Of course, there are apps like Nextdoor, which, you know, mostly is lost dogs, but occasionally you will find a little nugget of something that's useful to your, you know, there are Facebook groups and places like that. But we encourage our students to do a lot of social listening, where they're just kind of scrolling through the different social accounts on whatever platform or product that are viable in your community, and looking for ideas or ways to connect. Regularly, we will go into Facebook groups for Oglethorpe County or Athens Clarke County and see someone complaining about something. And then we will send them a link to one of our stories, or we will have a quick conversation and say, actually, no, the BOC did not approve that last night. Here was the vote. You know, here you go. That can be an amazing brand building tool, because you're essentially asserting yourself as somebody who has the information that people want and they're kind of calling out on social media randomly for. Does take some time investment, but if you can do it strategically, maybe say once a week, just kind of go in and see if there are ways that you can engage with the community where they're at, that can be a useful tool. Last but not least, if you can, pop your logo on everything you create as like a watermark or in the bottom right hand corner. Reuse on digital products and platforms is rampant, and people will just steal your stuff, man. They will just, your reporters or your personalities will go out and do something really cool, and someone will just grab it and act like it's theirs. So dropping those little logos or watermarks in the bottom right hand corner, like I did on this presentation. And so it's just such a good idea to make sure that that travels with your content. People could still crop it out if they really try hard, but typically if they're stealing, they're not trying hard. And then general kind of concepts that we always talk about with brand. Make sure that you don't make stuff too busy. You got to remember that most people are dealing with this size, right? Rather than the laptop size you're looking at right now. And so build in a lot of space around anything you create that's like a graphic. Few words as possible, lots of very big or one big image, only one or two font choices. I still see a lot of graphics on digital platforms that look like ransom notes, and it's very frightening. And think about as often as possible images that your staff took versus clip art or stock art. Even if it's just somebody with their phone going out and shooting what's happening, like, you know, really quick, like, I'm going to take a picture of this. Like, that's way preferable if it's an organic image versus something that you just found online or something like that. People are really drawn to those organic images, and they do help kind of build your brand because they say, I'm there. I was physically present. And that's a big deal. So those are my 70,000, no, it's like 7, I think, tips for building a digital brand. Thoughts, questions, comments, what's working for you? Anything for me?
Everyone's so quiet.
I know,
No,
Ken.
I appreciate the tips and all the information. I agree with you. Is consistent performance on social media really does make a difference.
Fabulous. And I'm glad you're seeing that too. Sometimes I do wonder, right? I'm like, am I the only, am I making this stuff up? There is a sense in which, and I would just again encourage you all to not feel like you have to overproduce. There is just so much out there that you can do quality and less, but consistently, and get just as much bang for your buck when it comes to what's happening there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the second part now, which is about money, which is probably why you came. Is that why you came? Because for the money part? Okay. So these are, again, a bunch of ideas that we've seen and used, whether it's at my students' organizations or out in stations throughout Georgia, as my students are working with them, about ways to sneak more revenue out of digital. I'm going to be super upfront with you when I say that digital itself, particularly social media, does not have like an ROI to it, right? Unless you become a YouTube influencer and you're able to capitalize, it's not like I'm going to get cash dollars from Facebook. In fact, they're going to use your content to make lots of cash dollars for themselves. And so I think that that is one of the things that probably as an industry we have to kind of struggle with and think about, which is again why I don't like a lot of high volume on social, because essentially you're not making money back from that. So what you do and what you can do is use digital to increase consistency, quality, trust, and credibility. It very much so is a subconscious persuader that you know what's going on, that you have something important to give that they want, and that you are connected and listening to them. And that's what audiences ultimately want, right? That's what all humans want, to make sure that they feel like they're connected to something larger than themselves and they're being heard. And so what that means for revenue, I've got some ideas. So here we go. For social media, you're not going to make revenue off Facebook, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, or all of the above in a traditional way. However, they are your gateway to revenue building products. So your stations, your websites, your newsletters, and your apps, where you actually control the content. Super important point here that I tell my students all the time when we talk about news literacy. The algorithm decides on all social platforms. It is controlling the information. You will never be able to outwit the algorithm or do enough, and it changes all the time. And so it's a place where you don't want to invest all of the things. What you do is you want to try to build those organic products that you can control: your website, your app, your email newsletters, your podcast, things that you have agency over, versus putting it out into the algorithm and just seeing what happens. Now, that being said, being on certain social medias does provide a gateway for a relationship with your audience. And it's about getting them, used to your logo, the people in your newsroom, that behind the scenes content, having them kind of see the kind of work that you do. It's like exposure more than anything else. And then hopefully a little bit of interaction, some conversation, them telling you what songs they want to hear, what news they want covered, and kind of having it be a thoroughfare for larger conversation in that way. If you are able to do that using social media platforms, that's a win, because you won't make money directly from them. It'll hopefully just build this connection between you and the audience, that then they will start going to the things that can make money. So that's a big one, and it's a sad story, because I wish we could just like rake in dollars off of Facebook, but we've really it's unfortunately not true at this point. Where we can start really do some revenue building are organic products. So I'm going to spend some time on those. So first of all, websites and apps. Digital advertising and digital sponsorships are ways to raise revenue. Most of you already know this. We see a lot of really good traction with bundling. So as much as possible, I think that that's probably a good strategy. But I would also push sponsorships over digital ads for several reasons. Number one, I think the ethos right now is that local news needs to be saved, and you can make kind of a philanthropic kind of concept with that. Second, a sponsorship doesn't need to be changed every week when they change the price of their product or they're advertising something new. And so it's less investment on your side if I have a digital sponsorship that lasts for 6 months or a year, and it's one graphic, and then we're just letting it hang out wherever it's hanging out. And it's a lot less, toil. Sponsorships tend to be longer contracts because people are doing it for that reason. So we're really moving, it's kind of a nonprofit feel almost, but we're moving more toward that sponsorship concept rather than advertising for those reasons. And I would love to hear if anyone has experience with those. Most of you don't have paywalls. Broadcasters are not like print shops. Print shops still have their paywalls up. And then they try to sell advertising, which doesn't make sense because it lowers the amount of people that can see it, right? But most of you probably don't have paywalls, but just a point that if we are monetizing digital ads and sponsorships, we don't want paywalls. We want as many eyeballs as we can on it. But I've also seen some stations have some really good experiences with sponsoring a section of the website, or say an app, or like the entire sports coverage area, and again putting that kind of like logo marking or whatever it is for their organization in an entire section, not just placing a digital ad in a spot. And I think again that provides a little bit more of a feel good moment for the organization or the company that's sponsoring, as well as a chance for you to not have to do such heavy lift on the actual side. So that's one area for growth. Another one is that I don't see enough people monetizing email newsletters. And I do think that is a huge opportunity. Email newsletters are still strong. They're like podcasts. Like, we never thought they would be here still in 2024, but here they are, and they're just rocking. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that email newsletters, I don't have to go out and find it. I don't have to do anything. It shows up like in my space, and there it is. Now, we know open rates and click-through rates can vary, but in general, we can do sponsorships and digital advertising inside email newsletters, or sections of email newsletters, that can be really beneficial. Quick note on that too, like, we can obviously do like a weekly roundup of the different things we've covered or whatever, but we're seeing increasing success with special edition newsletters. So the ones that come out with breaking news, or when a special event is happening in your community, like the Marigold Festival, or and so we build a special edition email newsletter around it and sell sponsorships for that. Or perhaps it's a series, and you have like a series of 3 or 4, and then that's it. Like, and but that has some revenue kind of built into it, or a deep dive into a subject. I know we are talking about sludge all the time here in Northeast Georgia, the chicken waste they just randomly dump at people's farms. It's atrocious. We're going to do an in-depth series on sludge. It's going to be a 3 or 4 part series. Sure, we're going to put it on our website, and we're going to put some of that content on social, but we're actually going to make it an email newsletter product that's delivered directly to our audiences. Now, of course, the catch with email newsletters is we have to collect email addresses. So you may have to start developing a mechanism for that. But once you have those, it really is a great direct communication tool with your audience. And then you can link them out to any other product. You can embed video and audio in them. There's just so many different things that you can do. And that can all be monetized, which is great. Audio, obviously, if you're doing radio, you're doing audio ads. But I will say that we're seeing growth in sponsorships for specialty podcasts or series. And that's really nice. As well as we're seeing some experimentation with smart speaker skills, Alexa, and things like that, being able to ask for information. Typically, I would encourage you to, with audio specifically, it really helps to put the sponsorship note or the digital ad at the beginning when you're talking about, say, a podcast, or if you're streaming audio online. That's totally different than video. So if we run into a video ad right away, we'll click off. But with audio, typically we will sustain and keep listening. And that's an interesting, just kind of research-based divide. Or the middle, obviously, can sometimes be useful as well. We can hook people in and then drop in a sponsorship or a digital ad. But I would also say that if you're using a lot of audio, if you're a radio station specifically, and you want to take that audio and put it on your website, and say put in a digital player like SoundCloud or Podbean, or embed it somehow, you can actually build a visual ad or sponsorship around it. And I'm seeing some bigger stations do that right now, but I think some local stations may benefit from that as well. I thought that was kind of a cool thing that I've seen. Also, we're seeing a lot of good traction with streaming apps for radio stations, that people will like download Hot 89.3, and they will stream it from their phones while they're outside working in the yard or going for a run. And so if you haven't looked into building an app that allows you to stream your audio I can talk to you more about that. I know some people who've had some good success with that. Video, obviously, video advertising, pre-roll, middle, or post-roll, can be good. I will say that video ads, for whatever reason, are clicked off a lot more. So sometimes if you want to monetize some video work that you do, you may want to do it around the video versus in the video, say on a website or an email newsletter or something like that. We just find that the rates of people clicking off when they hit the ad is just really high. And we want to keep them through your video content. And then, of course, we all know that streaming and OTT services are starting tiers of ad-free things. I think that translation to local media is a little bit nebulous right now. We're not exactly sure what we should be doing with that, and getting people to pay for tiers may be really challenging. But I do think there are some ways to monetize specific video. And again, I would think about like maybe a series, or maybe, going through and picking out specific types of videos that you've done and making what we call a vertical, where we're stringing together all these stories about sludge and then having someone sponsor that or advertise just within that. That can be useful. Last note is analytics. So one of the things that I feel strongly about is that we know who's doing what on our digital platforms and we respond to it. So knowing your analytics, obviously we have our Nielsen ratings and we have our viewership listenership, right? I think we need to start making a few more strategic decisions to create content that resonates with audiences based on our analytics. So this makes a really good bargain with advertisers and sponsors as well. We can say, hey, this type of content is really performing well. Would you like to sponsor more of this type of reporting or more of this type of event or more of, because we really see our audience engaging with it. So you can use your analytics as leverage to help drive more revenue, but also to maybe make more strategic content decisions about how you spend your time on the air or on your digital platforms. And once you kind of collect those numbers, that can be really useful. Okay, I see some questions popping up. So Mackenzie, let's see, no, let me see. Oh, I just found them. Yay, I typically use Zoom. Howard, you're asking a good CPM for users of websites and a good cost per page view, as well as good cost for pre-roll for audio streaming. Shoot, those are good questions. Okay, I want to throw that open. I think, of course, I'm going to say something horrible, like it depends on your market and it depends on, there's a lot of contextual factors for that. I don't know if I can throw out a number by any means. And I definitely am more of an editorial than a business person when it comes to knowing what's the going rate on things. But I'm curious maybe if anyone else has numbers or ranges of numbers for what Howard's talking about.
I know that when we do what we charge our clients out to get those CPMs, we always go with somewhere between, say, $22 a thousand views to, say, like $25, $26 per thousand. And that seems to go really well with the market. And we're in North Georgia, but we're all over North Georgia. And it goes really well. That we've done good with those kinds of rates, if that's helpful.
I think that's super helpful. So Howard, hopefully that gave you an idea for that. I think, when we talk about, particularly with page views, I mean, I've seen every range under the sun. It's to some degree what the market will bear. But I think there is an element of you want to lower it a little bit below, and then try to build the number of page views up as much as possible. And I think, obviously, what Ken's saying is he's found kind of a sweet spot where, he's getting more volume, which is what we want. Um, I'm going to pivot to Bill's question. What's a good, better, and best open rate for email newsletters? This is a fabulous question as well. So I would say the industry standard nationally for email newsletters is if you can crack 25% for an open rate, 1 in 4 actually clicking open that email, you are rocking it. Open rates are traditionally incredibly low. A lot of people delete the emails out. Now, that being said, it's not the same 1 in 4 people opening it every week. So it's funny how you will catch people at certain times. Certain people will be like, hey, I have a more flexible Friday today. I'll go ahead and open the email newsletter. But a 25% rate is actually fairly strong nationally. I will tell you though, local news is totally different because people are opting in because they care about the community, that the communities, the region, right, that you all are at. And so, say at the Oglethorpe Echo right now, we are around 70 to 75% open rate. That's bonkers. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. But it's because so many people, the only people who read our newsletter are people who care about Oglethorpe County. Like, we're not getting a bunch of other random people who are like, well, I might be interested. It's people who are committed to that. So I would say your goal on an open rate, if you can get to 40 or 50%, that's really respectable. You know, if you can beat 20 or 25, you can feel good about yourself against the national average, right? But if you're getting about half people to open every week, that's great. Click-through rates, of course, are lower. People are clicking through like an article to go to a website or to go to a podcast or to go to a video on YouTube. Those are going to be lower and a lot more variable. Sometimes 10 to 20% on an individual piece or article. But to me, that's not too dismaying. I think shooting for that halfway mark is probably good. Mackenzie, I don't know if you have anything to add on that because I know you do some email newsletters, right? As far as
Yeah,
open rate.
yeah, we do. Ours stay in about the like upper 30s open rate because we're not necessarily like news in your local communities. We're industry news, but that's still, you know, pretty good for like the industry standard, I would say.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
yeah, so that's just kind of my experience with the GAB.
Yeah. And I think that it's exactly like, you think about those thirds are probably different people at different times. And so if you're looking at your whole audience share, you're doing better than that. Sometimes metrics on email newsletters can be disheartening, but I actually do find it to be a really useful way to connect with an audience. And they're really simple to build, and you can use all free tools. So that's a win as well. Because if it doesn't cost overhead, just a little bit of time, and you're taking the content that you've already created for your station and just repackaging it slightly, that can be a huge win. Other questions, thoughts, or comments?
Those were really good questions.
They were. So at this point, if you're thinking, how the heck am I going to do some of these things? If I would like to do some of these things, I do have, I'm not just going to throw things at you. I'm actually going to try to help you do them. So we have 2 programs through the University of Georgia. I run what's called the Journalism Innovation Lab out of UGA. And we have 2 programs, one sponsored by GAB and one that GAB likes to participate in with us, that can send students to you in order to actually achieve these things, because I know that it's not like you don't have anything to do. So the one on the left is called the GAB Innovation Fellows. I just launched my 3 fellows for this semester, but the applications are always open. What happens is a student takes an entire semester, so about 4 months, and they put in about 4 to 5 hours a week with you remotely because they're still in class. And they're going to do what you need them to do to reach your digital goals or help you with strategy. So they can create content calendars, they can create email newsletters, they can help you think through how to reorganize your website. They can come up with an Instagram strategy that would reach younger audiences. They're really talented, digitally savvy students. And so the GAB pays them for their work. I advise them, and then they help you do something that you want to do. Usually we can get 1 or 2 goals accomplished over the course of a semester, and then leave you with lots of like tip sheets and video walkthroughs so you can continue to do the work once the student is done. The link is there, but it's also on the GAB website for the application, and it kind of explains more of it as well. The other program that we do is a little bit more short-term but intense. It's called Digital Natives. Same concept, but instead of doing 4 to 5 hours a week remotely for a semester, they do 1 week. It's the first week in January where they actually come to your newsroom, and they sit in your newsroom with you and work on whatever digital goals and strategies you want. So Digital Natives happens just the first week in January every year. Their travel, hotel, and food are all paid for by us. We have some generous donors, and then they get paid for their work as well to come in and just work in your station. And the students love it because they get to go inside stations and meet all of you and see your love for your communities and the cool work that you're doing. And then you all get digital support for free. So the website for that is listed as well, and our applications are always open. Typically, we pick our stations or our news organizations in like October, and the students start researching in November to prepare for their week in January. So I'm happy to answer any questions about those programs as well, but I do want you to know that I will not leave you alone to accomplish all of these many things, but we want to send students to come help because it's good for you and it's good for them. So any questions about the programs or anything we've talked about today?
Wanted to mention one more time the digital strategy guide that we have available to all of you guys on this call, and please reach out to us. Please email us. We'll send it to you for free. It's behind a login wall on our website, just because we want to make sure that it is for our members like you guys, to make sure it's just not out there from anybody, because Dr. Bright spends a lot of time on this and it is an amazing resource. So shoot me an email, shoot Garrett an email, and we'll send you that guide. It's great. You're going to want to use it.
I do. I like it too. Sometimes I read it for fun. It's mostly because I'm a dork. It was a pleasure speaking with you all today and answering your really good questions. Feel free to reach out to me as well, and I am happy to talk with you one-on-one. I also can meet with you all one-on-one on Zoom or a phone call and just do some digital strategizing. So GAB wants kind of a full support system to try to help you all do what you want to do digitally. So that's that's the other thing that we can do as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. I hope you all have a really good afternoon, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.